You know that feeling when you walk into a room and everyone pretends you're invisible? Yeah, that's my life these days, except instead of being ignored by strangers, it's my own family. My name is Lila Monroe, and if I had to describe myself in 3 words, they'd be sarcastic, stubborn, and slightly underestimated. At 16, I've already mastered the art of rolling my eyes without anyone noticing, or so I think. But trust me, living with my dad, Evan Monroe, and his new wife, Darcy Langley, takes every ounce of patience I have. Dad's this workaholic tech entrepreneur who barely looks up from his phone unless it's to ask me how school's going. Spoiler alert, it's fine. And then there's Darcy. Oh, Darcy. She's one of those people who probably wakes up at 5 a.m. just to take 10 selfies before choosing the perfect one for Instagram. Her entire life revolves around hashtags like hashtag blended family goals and hashtag living my best life. But let's be real, she couldn't blend peanut butter if her life depended on it. Ever since Dad married her 2 years ago, I felt like I'm living in some weird reality show where no one consulted me about the script. Breakfast at our house isn't exactly what you'd call family bonding time. It's more like a battle royale disguised as a meal. Picture this. Darcy sits at the head of the table, scrolling through her phone while sipping green juice like it's liquid gold. Finn, her 8-year-old son, is shoveling cereal into his mouth like he hasn't eaten in days. And then there's me, picking at my toast while silently plotting ways to escape the awkwardness. Oh, and Dad? He's buried in emails, occasionally mumbling something about quarterly reports like we're all supposed to care. Lila, Darcy says suddenly, snapping me out of my thoughts. That hoodie you're wearing doesn't exactly scream put together. Maybe try something brighter. She gives me this fake smile that makes me want to throw my orange juice across the table. Brighter? Seriously? The hoodie is vintage leather, soft as clouds, and has seen me through every bad day since 9th grade. If anything, she should dress brighter. Her wardrobe looks like it was curated by a robot programmed to hate fun. Thanks for the tip, I mutter, slouching lower in my chair. Dad glances up briefly, sensing the tension, but quickly goes back to typing. Classic. When life hands you lemons, make lemonade, or in my case, turn those lemons into photographic evidence of other people's ridiculousness. Photography is my thing. Not the posed, filtered kind that Darcy posts online, but raw, unfiltered shots that capture the truth behind the facade. I started taking pictures after Mom passed away. It was my way of holding on to memories that felt like they were slipping away. Now, it's become my secret weapon against the chaos of my life. I run an anonymous blog called Unfiltered Realities, where I post photos and captions that highlight the absurdity of modern life. One of my favorite posts, a picture of Darcy mid-yoga pose in our living room, captioned, "Namaste away from me, please." The comment section is pure gold, people love it. But lately, I've been itching to do something bigger. Something that will shake things up for good. That's why, when Darcy announced we were going to Aspen for a family vacation, I knew it was my chance to give her and Dad a taste of reality. This trip wasn't going to be about hashtag mountain vibes or hashtag ski squad smiles. No, this was going to be a vacation they'd never forget. And guess what? I had a plan. Packing for Aspen turned out to be less about preparation and more about power struggles. Darcy marched into my room like she owned the place, which technically she kinda does now, and immediately wrinkled her nose at the pile of clothes on my bed. "Really, Lila?" she said, holding up my favorite flannel shirt like it was hazardous waste. "This won't match anything I packed for us." Us? I raised an eyebrow. "Last time I checked, I don't share DNA with you." Her jaw tightened, and for a second, I thought she might actually throw the shirt out the window. Instead, she dropped it onto the floor and crossed her arms. "Look, I'm trying to create cohesion here. If we're going to present as a unified family, we need to coordinate our outfits." Oh, because nothing says unified like matching scarves and monogrammed luggage. I shot back, zipping up my duffel bag defiantly. Inside, I'd stuffed everything she hated. My leather jacket, ripped jeans, and a pair of combat boots that screamed rebellion. Little did she know, I'd also booked us a surprise activity that would send her precious itinerary straight into oblivion. If there's one person on Team Darcy who's worth recruiting, it's Finn. Sure, he's technically my stepbrother, but he's also my secret ally in this war against perfectionism. The kid worships me, not that I blame him. Compared to Darcy's endless rules and lectures, I must seem like the coolest human alive. So, naturally, when I told him about my plans for Aspen, his eyes lit up like Christmas morning. "We're gonna ruin her trip," he whispered conspiratorially as we sat on the couch later that night. "Not ruin," I corrected, smirking. "More like improve it. You'll see." Finn nodded eagerly, already imagining the chaos we could unleash. "What do I need to do?" "For now, just keep your ears open and report back if she starts talking about spa treatments or yoga classes. Trust me, we're gonna need all the intel we can get." As Finn scampered off to eavesdrop on Darcy's phone calls, I couldn't help but feel a surge of excitement. This trip was shaping up to be epic, and maybe, just maybe, it would teach Darcy a lesson she desperately needed to learn. The moment we stepped onto the plane, I knew this trip was going to be a goldmine for unfiltered realities. Darcy practically strutted down the aisle like she owned the aircraft, clutching her designer carry-on and a silk scarf that screamed, "I belong in Paris, not economy class." Finn followed close behind, clutching his Nintendo Switch like it was a lifeline. Dad trailed after them, still glued to his laptop, muttering something about quarterly projections under his breath. And me? Well, I brought up the rear, armed with my camera and a playlist of songs specifically chosen to annoy Darcy. As soon as we settled into our seats, yes, first class, because apparently blending seamlessly means spending half your mortgage on airfare, Darcy whipped out her phone and started live streaming. "Hey, followers," she chirped, adjusting her hair in the seatback mirror. "We're heading to Aspen for a dream vacation. Stay tuned for all the deets. We're talking luxury lodges, gourmet meals, and family bonding galore." I leaned over and whispered loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Don't forget to mention the part where you forced us to pack matching pajamas." Darcy shot me a glare but kept smiling for the camera. "Oh, Lila's just being silly," she said sweetly, though her clenched jaw told a different story. "She loves a good joke." "Yeah, hilarious," I muttered, snapping a discreet photo of her mid-smile. Caption idea: Stepmom Chronicles, when fake smiles become an Olympic sport. Things only got worse when the turbulence hit. As the plane bounced through the clouds, Darcy clutched her armrest like it was the last lifeboat on the Titanic. Finn giggled uncontrollably every time she squealed, while Dad tried, and failed, to reassure her that turbulence was normal. Meanwhile, I sipped my complimentary ginger ale and pretended to read a book, secretly enjoying the chaos. By the time we landed, Darcy looked like she'd aged 5 years. Mission accomplished. If the flight was bad, checking into our lodge was an outright disaster. Darcy had been gushing about the 5-star chalet she booked for weeks, complete with hot tubs, panoramic views, and daily housekeeping service. But when we pulled up to what was clearly a rustic log cabin instead of a glass-walled palace, her face went from glowing to ghostly white in record time. "What is this?" she demanded, pointing dramatically at the cabin like it had personally offended her. "That would be our home for the week," I replied innocently, pulling my duffel bag out of the car. "Hope you didn't forget your flannel shirts. They're basically required attire here." Darcy whirled around to glare at Dad. "Evan, did you know about this?" He blinked, clearly confused. No? I thought you handled all the bookings." "Oh, I did," I chimed in helpfully. "And let me tell you, it wasn't easy finding a place that screams authentic mountain experience." "You're welcome." Darcy's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Lila Monroe, I swear, if this is some kind of prank." "It's not a prank," I interrupted, feigning innocence. "It's called stepping outside your comfort zone. You should try it sometime." While Darcy fumed, Finn wandered off to explore the cabin, already loving its quirks. There were mismatched furniture pieces, a fireplace that smelled faintly of smoke, and a creaky wooden staircase that groaned with every step. It was far from perfect, but honestly, it felt kind of magical. Dad seemed to agree, shrugging off Darcy's complaints and suggesting they make the best of it. But I could tell this was only the beginning. If Darcy thought the cabin was bad, wait until she found out about the snowshoe tour I'd signed us up for tomorrow. Let's just say, moose sightings weren't the only surprises in store. The next morning, I woke up early to catch the sunrise over the mountains, a rare moment of peace before the storm, literally and figuratively. The air was crisp, The sky painted in shades of pink and orange, and for a brief second, I almost forgot why we were here. Almost. By the time everyone else shuffled downstairs, bleary-eyed and cranky, I was ready to spring phase 2 of Operation Ruin Darcy's vacation into action. "Good morning, team," I announced cheerfully, holding up 4 pairs of rented snowshoes. "Who's ready for an adventure?" Darcy froze mid-yawn. "Snowshoes? What do you mean, snowshoes?" I said, grinning. "We're going on a guided tour today. Ranger Hank himself will be leading us through the trails. Fun, right?" Her expression shifted from confusion to outright horror. "But I don't even own proper hiking boots." "No worries," I replied breezily. "They provide those too. Though, fair warning, they might not match your outfit." Before she could protest further, Finn jumped in, bouncing excitedly. "This is gonna be awesome. Can we see Moose? Please say we'll see Moose." Dad hesitated, glancing between me and Darcy, but ultimately sided with Finn. "Come on, Darcy, it'll be fun. Think of it as quality family time. Quality family time. More like quality chaos time." When we arrived at the trailhead, Ranger Hank greeted us with a toothy grin and a cowboy hat that looked like it had seen better days. He launched into a rambling speech about local wildlife, survival skills, and the importance of respecting nature. Darcy spent most of it sneaking glances at her reflection in her phone screen, clearly regretting her life choices. Then came the real kicker. The trail turned out to be steeper and muddier than advertised. Within minutes, Darcy slipped and sank knee-deep into a patch of slushy snow. Her scream echoed through the forest, startling a flock of birds. Finn doubled over laughing, while Dad rushed to help her up. I snapped a quick photo, caption already forming in my head. "Stepmom versus Mother Nature. Guess who won?" By the time we trudged back to the cabin after the snowshoe fiasco, Darcy was fuming, and not just because her designer boots were now caked in mud. She stomped inside, leaving wet footprints all over the hardwood floor, and immediately launched into a tirade about how this entire trip has been a disaster. "Lila," she snapped, pointing an accusatory finger at me. "You planned this whole thing, didn't you? The cabin, the snowshoes, everything." I shrugged nonchalantly, even though my stomach churned with guilt. "What can I say? You wanted authenticity. This is authentic." Dad tried to intervene, holding up his hands like he was negotiating a hostage situation. Okay, let's all calm down. It's been a long day. How about we order pizza and call it a night?" Pizza sounded great to me, but Darcy wasn't having it. "Pizza? Are you kidding me? We're supposed to be bonding over gourmet meals, not greasy takeout." That's when Finn chimed in, his voice small but firm. "I like pizza better than fancy food anyway." The room fell silent. Even Darcy looked stunned that her own son had sided against her. For a moment, I almost felt bad for her, almost. But then she turned her glare back on me, and any sympathy evaporated. "You think this is funny, don't you?" she said, her voice trembling with anger. "You think ruining our vacation makes you some kind of hero?" Her words hit harder than I expected. Maybe because deep down, I knew she wasn't entirely wrong. After dinner, or rather, after Dad quietly ordered pizza despite Darcy's protests, I retreated to my room, slamming the door behind me. Normally, I'd blast music or scroll through Instagram to blow off steam, but tonight, I couldn't shake the look on Darcy's face during our argument. Sure, she deserved some payback for treating me like an afterthought all these years, but did that mean I had to go this far? Finn knocked on my door a little while later, carrying a plate of leftover pizza. "Can I come in?" he asked softly. I nodded, scooting over to make room for him on the bed. He sat cross-legged, munching on a slice of pepperoni while studying me intently. "Are you mad at Mom?" he asked finally. "She's not my mom," I muttered, avoiding his gaze. "I know," he said. "But are you mad at her?" I sighed, leaning back against the wall. "I don't know, Finn. Sometimes I feel like she doesn't even see me, you know? Like I'm just this annoying kid who gets in the way of her perfect life." He frowned, clearly processing my words. "She does care about you, Lila. She just doesn't always know how to show it." His comment caught me off guard. When was the last time anyone had defended Darcy to me? Probably never. And yet, here was Finn, 8 years old and wise beyond his years, trying to bridge the gap between us. As much as I hated to admit it, maybe my plan wasn't helping. maybe it was making things worse for everyone. If Aspen had taught me anything so far, it was that nature didn't care about your drama. Just as I started questioning whether my revenge plot was worth it, a sudden blizzard rolled in, trapping us inside the cabin overnight. With no power, no Wi-Fi, and limited supplies, tempers flared faster than ever. "This is ridiculous," Darcy exclaimed, pacing the living room like a caged animal. "How are we supposed to survive without electricity? What if someone gets hurt? What if—" "Relax, Darcy," I interrupted, rolling my eyes. "It's just a storm. People lived without electricity for centuries, you know." "Well, excuse me for preferring modern conveniences," she shot back, glaring daggers at me. Meanwhile, Finn huddled under a blanket, looking increasingly anxious. Dad tried to keep things light by attempting to start a fire in the wood-burning stove, but his efforts only resulted in a cloud of smoke that sent us all coughing. Seeing the chaos unfold, I realized I couldn't sit back and do nothing anymore. Whether I liked it or not, we were stuck together, and someone needed to step up. So, I grabbed a flashlight and headed outside to gather firewood, ignoring the biting wind and icy ground beneath my boots. When I came back inside, arms full of logs, Darcy actually looked surprised. "Why are you helping?" she asked suspiciously. "Because contrary to what you seem to think," I replied, dropping the wood near the stove, "I'm not the villain here." For once, she didn't have a snarky comeback. Instead, she helped me stack the logs, and together, with a lot of trial and error, we managed to get the fire going. As the flames crackled to life, casting flickering shadows across the room, I noticed something unexpected. Darcy looked human. Not the polished Instagram influencer or the control freak I'd grown to resent, but a real person, tired and vulnerable, and maybe even a little scared. Maybe, just maybe, this storm would force all of us to see each other differently. By morning, the blizzard showed no signs of letting up. Trapped inside the cabin with nothing but each other's company, tensions reached a breaking point. Darcy paced the room like a caged lion, her frustration bubbling over. "You know what, Lila?" she snapped, spinning around to face me. "I'm done pretending you're some innocent victim here. You've been sabotaging this trip from day one." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. For once, I didn't have a clever comeback ready. Instead, I felt my own anger rising. "Oh, poor Darcy," I shot back, standing up to meet her glare. "Can't handle a little imperfection? Welcome to the real world. It's messy, unpredictable, and doesn't revolve around your Instagram feed." Evan stepped between us, his voice sharp with authority. "Enough! Both of you need to stop acting like children and figure this out." His rare outburst stunned everyone into silence. Even Finn, who had been quietly drawing in the corner, looked up with wide eyes. But Darcy wasn't done yet. She turned to Evan, her voice trembling. "Do you hear yourself? You're taking her side again, just like always." That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about me and Darcy anymore. It was about Dad, too. How he'd been absent, distracted, and unwilling to address the growing rift in our family. "You think I wanted any of this?" I shouted, tears welling up despite my best efforts to hold them back. "You act like I'm ruining your perfect life, but guess what? I don't even feel like part of this family anymore." The room fell silent. My confession hung heavy in the air, raw and unfiltered. For the first time, I saw cracks in Darcy's polished facade. Her lips parted as if to respond, but no words came out. After the explosion inside, I couldn't stand being cooped up any longer. Grabbing my coat, I stormed outside, ignoring the biting wind and ankle-deep snow. I needed space to breathe, to think, to process everything that had just happened. A few minutes later, I heard footsteps crunching behind me. "Lila," Dad called softly. I didn't turn around. "What do you want?" He sighed, coming to stand beside me. "I wanted to check on you. Make sure you're okay." "Okay." I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. "No, I'm not okay. None of us are okay. Did you ever stop to think about how I feel since you married Darcy? Or were you too busy working or staring at your phone to notice?" Dad flinched, guilt flashing across his face. I thought you'd adjust. That you'd understand." "Understand what? That you replaced Mom? Is that what you wanted me to understand?" The words spilled out before I could stop them, sharp and accusing. "No, he said firmly, placing a hand on my shoulder. I could never replace your mom. But I also can't keep living in the past, Lila. I love Darcy, and I want us to be a family. But I realize now that I've been failing you and Finn. I've let work and distractions get in the way, and for that I'm sorry. His apology caught me off guard. For so long, I'd blamed Darcy for everything, but hearing Dad admit his mistakes made me see things differently. Maybe we were all guilty of something, not just her. Back inside, the atmosphere was tense but quieter. Darcy sat by the fire, staring into the flames with an unreadable expression. When she noticed me hovering near the doorway, she hesitated before speaking. I wasn't always like this, you know, she said quietly, surprising me. Like what? I asked cautiously, leaning against the doorframe. So, obsessed with perfection. With appearances. She sighed, running a hand through her hair. Growing up, I was the awkward kid, the one nobody noticed unless they needed someone to pick on. So when I got older, I promised myself I'd never let anyone make me feel invisible again. I built this image, this persona, because it made me feel safe. Invincible even. Her admission threw me off balance. I'd spent so much time hating her polished exterior that I never considered why she hid behind it in the first place. But lately, she continued, her voice barely above a whisper, I've started wondering if I've gone too far. If trying to be perfect has cost me more than it's given me. For the first time, I saw Darcy not as my enemy, but as someone struggling with insecurity, fear, and maybe even loneliness. It didn't excuse everything she'd done, but it humanized her in a way I hadn't expected. The next day, the storm finally cleared, and we ventured into town. On a whim, I suggested visiting an art gallery I'd read about online, a cozy space showcasing local artists. To my surprise, Darcy agreed without argument. Inside, the walls were lined with paintings, sculptures, and photographs that told stories of pain, resilience, and hope. One piece in particular caught my eye, a black and white photo of a fractured mirror, its shards reflecting distorted images of the same face. The caption read, "Sometimes breaking apart lets you see yourself more clearly." That's beautiful, Darcy murmured, standing beside me. It is, I agreed, glancing at her sideways. Kind of like how families are, I guess. Messy but still worth fixing. She smiled faintly, and for the first time, it felt genuine, not forced or filtered. Later, Finn dragged us to a nearby cafe, where we shared hot chocolate and laughter over silly jokes. Even Dad joined in, snapping candid photos instead of checking emails. For the first time in years, it felt like we were actually connecting, not just coexisting. That evening, back at the cabin, we gathered around the fireplace for what felt like the first real conversation we'd ever had. I owe you all an apology, Darcy began, her voice steady but sincere. I've been so focused on creating this picture-perfect life that I forgot what really matters. Being present for Evan, for Finn, and yes, even for you, Lila. I haven't been fair to any of you, and I'm sorry. Finn grinned, nudging her playfully. Does this mean no more yoga classes at 6 a.m.? Everyone laughed, easing the tension. Then it was my turn to speak. I'm sorry too, I admitted, fidgeting with the hem of my sweater. I shouldn't have gone out of my way to ruin the trip. I guess I just wanted to be seen, not as a problem to fix, but as part of the family. Dad nodded, his expression softening. We'll do better, Lila. All of us. Starting now. As we sat there, sharing stories and making plans for the future, I realized something important. Families aren't perfect, but they're ours. And sometimes, breaking apart is the first step toward coming back together stronger than ever. The next morning, I woke up to sunlight streaming through the cabin windows and a fresh layer of snow blanketing the ground outside. It was our last full day in Aspen, and while part of me dreaded going back to reality, another part felt lighter than I had in months. On impulse, I grabbed my coat and headed outside, intent on building something, anything, to mark the end of this chaotic yet transformative trip. As I started rolling a giant snowball for the base of a snowman, Finn appeared, bundled up and grinning. Can I help? Sure, I said, stepping aside so he could roll the second ball. But only if you promise not to steal its carrot nose. He giggled, and soon we were joined by Dad and even Darcy, who hesitated at first, but eventually dove in with surprising enthusiasm. Together, we pieced together a lopsided snowman wearing mismatched accessories, a scarf from Dad's suitcase, one of Finn's gloves, and an old hat I'd brought along just in case. When it was done, Darcy stood back, admiring our creation. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "it's kind of perfect. Not picture perfect, but real." "Exactly," I replied, smiling despite myself. "Kind of like us." For the first time, the idea of being part of this quirky, imperfect family didn't feel so bad after all. Once we returned to Seattle, things didn't magically go back to normal. In fact, nothing about our routine felt quite the same anymore. For starters, Darcy made a conscious effort to include me in decisions around the house. One evening, she knocked on my bedroom door holding 2 cookbooks. "I was thinking of trying out some new recipes," she said hesitantly. "Any preferences?" I raised an eyebrow, suspicious but intrigued. "Are you asking me or testing me?" She laughed nervously. "Asking, I swear. Unless you hate cooking, in which case, never mind." "No, it's fine," I interrupted, taking one of the books from her. "How about tacos? They're hard to mess up." "Tacos it is," she agreed, looking relieved. Over the next few weeks, these small gestures added up. Darcy stopped obsessing over Instagram likes and started spending more time offline with us. She even asked to see some of my photography projects, genuinely interested in learning what inspired me. Meanwhile, I toned down the sarcasm, well, mostly, and tried to give her credit when she deserved it. Dad, too, followed through on his promise to be more present. He instituted Tech-Free Tuesdays, where everyone unplugged from devices and spent quality time together. At first, it felt awkward. We weren't used to entertaining ourselves without screens, but eventually, it became something we looked forward to. Board games, baking disasters, and impromptu dance parties became staples of our Tuesday nights. Even Finn seemed happier, thriving in the warmer, more inclusive atmosphere. "This is the best year ever," he declared one evening as we played charades, laughing until our sides hurt. With Darcy's encouragement, I decided to take Unfiltered Realities public, not just as a blog, but as a way to document the changes happening within our family. I posted photos and reflections about our journey, highlighting both the messy moments and the milestones. To my surprise, readers responded enthusiastically, praising the honesty and vulnerability in my posts. Encouraged by the support, I invited Darcy to collaborate on a guest post about her own struggles with perfectionism. She hesitated at first, unsure if she was ready to share such personal insights, but ultimately agreed. Her post, titled Embracing Imperfection, Lessons from a Recovering Perfectionist, resonated deeply with readers. In it, she wrote candidly about her childhood insecurities, her fear of failure, and how meeting our family had pushed her to confront those demons head-on. When the comments poured in, messages of gratitude, solidarity, and encouragement, I saw a side of Darcy I'd never imagined existed, brave, open-hearted, and determined to grow. One of the biggest changes came in the form of new traditions. Inspired by our snowman building session in Aspen, we started hosting monthly family project days, where we worked together on creative endeavors, gardening, painting murals, even building a tree house in the backyard. On Sundays, we began having brunch together, sharing stories about the week ahead and reflecting on the week behind. These meals quickly became sacred ground, a space where everyone's voice mattered equally. Darcy surprised us all by suggesting we start a photo album to document these moments. "Not for social media," she clarified, flipping through the pages of an old scrapbook she'd found in storage. "Just for us." By the time winter rolled around again, we'd fill the album with snapshots of our growing bond. Finn covered in flour during a cookie baking disaster, Dad attempting to fix a leaky faucet and failing spectacularly, and Darcy teaching me how to knit also badly. Each photo told a story of progress, patience, and love. As the year drew to a close, I found myself reflecting on how far we'd come since that disastrous Aspen trip. Sure, there were still arguments. Families aren't immune to conflict, but they no longer felt like insurmountable chasms. Instead, they were opportunities to communicate, compromise, and understand each other better. One evening, as we sat around the dining table playing a board game, Darcy paused mid-turn to look at me. "You know, Lila, I never thanked you properly for that trip." I blinked, caught off guard. Thanks for what?" "For shaking things up." she said with a small smile. It wasn't easy, but it made me realize how much I needed to change, not just for myself, but for all of us. Touched, I nodded. Well, maybe next time we can plan a vacation together. You know, skip the sabotage and go straight to teamwork. Deal, she replied, extending her hand for a mock handshake. As we laughed and continued our game, I realized something important. Families aren't defined by perfection, they're defined by effort. By showing up, even when it's hard. By choosing each other, flaws and all. And for the first time, I felt truly grateful to call this imperfect, messy, beautiful group of people my family. A few months later, my photography was featured in a local art exhibit showcasing young talent. A milestone I dreamed about for years but never thought would actually happen. The gallery was small but packed with people, including classmates, teachers, and even some strangers who had followed unfiltered realities. But the most important attendees were my family. Darcy arrived wearing an outfit that was surprisingly understated yet stylish, her hair pulled back into a simple ponytail. Finn clung to her hand, wide-eyed at the crowd, while Dad carried a bouquet of flowers he picked out himself. When they spotted me near the entrance, Darcy immediately pulled me into a hug. "You're amazing, Lila," she whispered, her voice thick with pride. The exhibit featured photos from various stages of my life, including candid shots of our family taken during the Aspen trip. One photo in particular drew a lot of attention. A close-up of Darcy mid-laugh, snowflakes clinging to her eyelashes, looking genuinely happy. Beneath it, I'd written the caption, "Sometimes happiness hides in plain sight. You just have to let it in." As visitors admired the display, I noticed Darcy standing quietly in front of the photo, tears glistening in her eyes. She turned to me, smiling softly. "Thank you for seeing me, the real me." I shrugged, pretending to be nonchalant, but inside, I felt a surge of warmth. For so long, I'd resented her for being fake, but now I realized she'd simply been afraid to be vulnerable. And in capturing her true self through my lens, I'd helped her, and myself, see that vulnerability wasn't weakness, it was strength. After the exhibit, we went to a nearby cafe to celebrate. Over hot chocolate and pastries, the conversation turned reflective. "You know," Darcy said, stirring her drink thoughtfully, "this whole year has taught me something important. Families aren't perfect, no matter how hard you try to make them that way. What matters is showing up, for better or worse, and choosing to love each other anyway." "I couldn't agree more," Dad chimed in, raising his mug in a mock toast. "Here's to embracing imperfection and making the best of it." Finn giggled, spilling cocoa on his shirt, which prompted a round of laughter from everyone. Even I joined in, feeling lighter than I had in ages. Later, as we walked home under the glow of streetlights, Darcy pulled me aside for one last heart-to-heart. "Lila," she began, hesitating before continuing, "I want you to know that I'm not going anywhere. Whether you like it or not, you're stuck with me." To my surprise, I smiled. "Good, because believe it or not, I kinda like having you around." Her eyes widened, then softened with emotion. "Really?" "Yeah," I admitted, shrugging again to play it cool. "You're not half bad when you're not obsessing over hashtags, that is." She laughed, pulling me into another hug. This time, I didn't resist. The final scene takes place a few weeks later, back at home during one of our Sunday brunches. The table is cluttered with plates of pancakes, bowls of fruit, and a pitcher of orange juice that Finn insists on pouring himself, despite the inevitable spill. Laughter fills the air as we share stories about the week ahead and reminisce about the past. I glance around the table, at Dad's goofy grin as he recounts a funny work story, at Darcy's quiet smile as she listens intently, at Finn's animated gestures as he explains his latest Lego creation, and feel an overwhelming sense of gratitude. This isn't the picture-perfect family I once imagined wanting. There are still arguments, misunderstandings, and moments of frustration. But it's real, it's messy, and most importantly, it's ours. As I snap one last photo of the group, I mentally caption it. "Family isn't perfect, but it's ours." The camera clicks, freezing the moment forever.